Could you survive without debt? Sounds like an easy question to answer, but is it? We'll discuss it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Ted, welcome back. We've got a really simple question today.
I like simple questions.
Simple. This is simple. Nice short podcast for everyone. How do you know if you are dependent on debt? That's today's question. But we're going to start with an even simpler question. I want you to get warmed up here. How do you know if you're dependent on credit?
All right. Well, simply, do you pay cash for everything that you buy, or do you have to pull out the plastic? So if every time you have to purchase something, gas for the car, bread and milk at the convenience store, are you pulling out a plastic card to make the purchase, or have you got $20 in your pocket?
And so is that a problem? Like, it sounds to me like that's a great thing. I use my credit card for everything, so I get all these points and miles and all these other things.
Yeah, years ago you said credit is a replacement for cash. It's not a replacement for
borrowing.
Right.
I did say that.
You
That's
did.
I should
Is
put
that in your book?
Is that in the book? Ted got to the promo for the book right away. That is fantastic.
So the important thing is, are you using credit like a tool? Or are you using credit because you don't have any choice? Right? If it's a tool, that's great because, you're not carrying cash, so you don't have to be nervous about that or, falling out of your pocket. You can keep track of all your transactions because you're going to get a statement at the end of the month to show exactly where you spent your money. The mistake most people make is they keep cash in their pocket and they use the credit. And so at the end of the month, the cash that should have paid the bill is gone. And so now it's not credit anymore. Now it's debt.
And we're going to talk about debt. So before we do, does it matter what type of credit you're using? So, there's different types of credit. Mortgages, credit cards you already talked about, payday loans.
And we've had these discussions in the past too. Is there good debt versus bad debt? So we'll talk about the credit thing first. There are certain types of credit that just about everybody has to use. How are you going to buy a house without getting a mortgage? Well, there are very few people that can do it. None of them are on this radio program.
That's correct, yes.
Or listening to this radio program, probably. Cars even. Most people need to finance a car, either a lease or some kind of finance contract to buy it. Credit cards, again, they're okay if you pay them off every month. But you got to notice that every step I've taken down this credit ladder, the interest rates have gotten higher. So the mortgage is relatively inexpensive. They know you need it. It's a service, and it's relatively safe. The car loan is probably twice what the mortgage rate is, but it's still relatively safe. If you don't pay, they'll take the car. Now we're into credit cards. 11% if you're a good customer, 18% if you're a so-so customer, 30% if you're dealing with
a department store or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Or you've had payment problems. So credit is bad if you actually, so let's say it that way. Being approved for credit is good. Actually using credit so it becomes debt is bad.
And you didn't even mention payday loans. That was remarkable restraint on
I'm
your
willing to
part
bet
there.
somewhere in here you're going to hit me with the payday loans.
Going down the ladder. Well,
348%.
Yes, they're very high. So what then is the risk of being dependent on credit?
The biggest single risk is that what if somebody cuts off your access to credit? Physically they could do that by just the banks being down. But I'm thinking of something a little more nefarious. What if the bank says, no, you're having payment problems. We're not going to extend you any more credit. Well, your plan has always been that I'm going to pay for everything on my credit card and the money will be in at the end of the month. Well, if they stop letting you use a credit card and you haven't got the money, what the hell are you going to do?
Well, and if you've had problems in the past and things are going good now, but then you forget to make your payment this month.
And everybody does.
And I'm told that there's a bank out there that has just changed the payment schedules on people.
This was an off-the-show discussion we had.
That's for our paid premium subscribers who get to hear the discussion before the show. But you were telling me about a particular bank that has adjusted their billing cycle so that it is now 3 days earlier than when it used to be.
At least it is for me. And so I used to pay off my balance on the last day of the month because that's when we do expense reports. And I noticed 2 or 3 months ago, they've moved my payment date up to something like the 27th now. And so for those 3 months before I noticed the change, they made interest for 3 months on my bill. And I looked at it and go, why the hell am I paying interest? Well, the first month I figured I was stupid. Second month, I was pretty sure it wasn't me. The third month, I changed my habits now.
Yeah.
But that was the thing they did.
And there's a classic example of you're using credit, everything's going great. Somebody changes the rules.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't realize that. And do we all take our credit card statement every month and go through it in detail? Well, yes, I hope we do. But do you actually look at the payment date, all the little terms every month? Like, it's been the same way for 20 years. Why would I look at it?
Well, and worse, the people that are having payment problems are the ones that are least likely to look at it, because intuitively you just go, look, this is a problem. I want to avoid it. Okay, this is my minimum payment. I'm just going to make the payment and ignore the problem.
Bury my head in the sand, and I don't want to see. So the risk of being dependent on credit is that things can change.
Right.
And we've talked about on this show things like lines of credit, where the bank says, oh, by the way, guess what? Instead of being a 5% interest rate, you're now 10%.
Yep.
Bam.
And nothing you can do about it, because you can't pay off the line of credit overnight because you thought you were going to have it forever.
And so then you're toast. So, okay, so being dependent on credit there's nothing wrong with it from a convenience factor. I'm not going to carry a big wad of cash in my pocket. I go to the store, I use a credit card, no big deal. And so long as I know what my payment dates are, pay it off at the end of every month, I'm good. So that was a long preamble. Let's get to the actual question of the show today.
That was a simple question,
That was a simple question. Today's question: how do I know if I am dependent on debt? So we've talked about credit, and we were really talking about the physical card, that sort of thing. How do you know if you're dependent on debt?
Okay. So you're dependent on debt if the amount that you owe people at the end of the month never goes down, or worse, it actually increases. So dependent on credit means you use the card all the time to make purchases, but you pay it off. Dependent on debt means at the end of the month, there's a balance on that card. And what's worse is the next month, the balance is higher. And the month after that, it's higher. And then you find you don't have access to that credit anymore, so you tap into other forms of borrowing. And at some point, you end up dealing with those payday loan people and installment loans, and then you're coming to see me.
And so have you ever encountered someone who comes into your office and you're meeting with, 20, 30, 40 people every week, who doesn't realize they're dependent on debt?
All the time. In fact, I think most of the marketing firms now are teaching people to ignore debt. They're telling folks to focus on, this is your payment. You can afford this payment. We'll make it an easy installment payment. It's not how much you're actually paying to purchase the item, the cost of borrowing, the interest. It's, this is your payment. And that's just a wrong-headed way to approach things, particularly when dealing with debt.
So you should be looking at the total amount you owe, not the monthly payment.
Right.
Well, isn't that the trick that car places have been using forever?
Sure, but now everyone's using that trick.
Because it used to be, we can put you into this car. It's going to be $99 a week.
Right.
Oh, $99. That doesn't sound like very much money. So now it may be an $80,000 car, and you may be paying for the next 100 years, but you
particularly
focus on
if you've rolled over 2 cars before into it, right?
You got a big shortfall into it.
Yep.
But you're saying that now everyone is looking at their credit card payment the same way.
Everyone, can I afford my monthly payment? So it's not, can I carry this debt? They're not even thinking of it in terms of debt. They're thinking of it in terms of payments.
And they're looking at their payment as just another expense.
I know I'm going to pay it every month, so I've got a budget for a payment.
So I've got rent, I've got groceries, I've got my credit card payment, and so on. Now, that makes perfect sense for something like a mortgage payment.
Right, because it's long-term debt and you've got to live someplace. And we talked about that. A mortgage is going to be, relatively speaking, very low interest.
Yeah, compared to all the other forms. So, it happens to me all the time when I'm meeting with someone. Okay, walk me through who you owe money to. They walk, and the last one, and I've got this mortgage. Well, but that's the biggest number.
Right.
Yeah, but it's a monthly payment. It's always the same. I put it out of my mind. So the trap then is you start to think that my monthly payment on my credit card,
it's just a cost of living and you got to pay.
It's just a cost of living. And it isn't.
Well, it shouldn't be. For a number of people, it is. And the trick is, how do you get your debt level down low enough that you no longer have to think of it that way?
So what is the solution then? So if someone is listening to us today, or someone knows, friend, family member, whatever, who has a bunch of debt, and what you're describing being dependent on debt is the debt number isn't moving.
Right.
And
worse, it's moving in the wrong direction.
Or moving in the wrong direction. And we see that all the time, too. I had a $10,000 limit on my credit card, and now I got a $12,000 limit.
Right.
This is great.
They're happy to give you more because you're a great customer.
Because I make the minimum payments. It's minimum payments every month. So the warning signs would be, are you just making the minimum payments every month?
That's an excellent warning sign, because if you're only paying the minimums, you're not paying off the debt.
And the credit cards now have to disclose how long it will take you to pay it off.
Right.
And there are some people coming to see me, and it's like decades.
Yep. Well, because the minimum payments, you could be 25 or 30 years, depending on the level of debt you're carrying.
Yeah, and you're not budging the debt a whole lot when you're
Right.
when you're just doing that. So being just making the minimum payments, that's a pretty obvious one. You're dependent on debts. What are some other things? What are some other things you see?
So if you have to wait to make important payments or wait to make important purchases because you don't have room on your credit to do it. So you're not talking about having savings to make a purchase. The car needs snow tires. The winter's coming in a few months. If you don't plan ahead for that and you get to November and you can't buy the snow tires, what's going to happen? Well, you're dependent on your debt. And the only way you can get them is to increase your debt. Now you've got to find new credit to be able to buy them on top of that. You really have a problem.
Yeah, and you already also mentioned about sticking your head in the sand.
Yep.
If you're not opening your statements when they come in every month, then you got a problem. And I guess most people don't get a statement in the mail anymore.
Yeah, it comes to you electronically.
It's all electronically.
And so much of that stuff is just, okay, what's my payment is usually in the cover email. I make the payment and I just ignore the bill.
Yeah, it used to be that the envelope comes in the mail, so I open it, I look at it, it's a physical piece of paper. Oh, look at this, the payment date has changed or whatever. Now I'm getting an email.
Right.
Or in most cases, I'm getting an alert that my statement is now there. I got to go log into the bank. I got to go log into the credit card, whatever, to see it.
Or they'll just take their payment.
Yeah, and maybe you're set up on automatic payments. So what are the chances that instead of just ripping open the envelope, now I'm going to click on this, click on that. Oh, I got to find my password. Oh, now there's two-factor authentication. I got to get my phone to make sure I get logged in. Forget about it. I'm not going to worry about it. So it becomes a serious problem. So solutions.
All right. So you need to know who it is that you owe. So you've got to take an inventory of your debt, just like you inventory everything else in your house. You need to know how much you're paying for that debt. So we're not talking about credit anymore. We're talking about you've already used the credit, you've spent the money, so now we're looking at how do we pay this debt back? And so you've got to have a plan in place for dealing with it. Accountants call that a budget. I don't use that kind of language very often because a lot of people don't like the term. But what it means is being aware of how much money you have coming in and how to spend it. And here's a good way to look at those minimum payments. Figure out how much of it's interest only. And the way you want to think about interest is you're paying somebody else your hard-earned cash for using their money. And so you don't get anything for that after you bought the thing. The money is gone. But every month you are giving them some of your hard-earned cash to carry that debt. You're not getting anything new for it. The money's gone.
So practically speaking, I get a piece of paper or I get a spreadsheet if I'm a fancy guy.
Right.
And I write down credit card number 1, number 2, line of credit, mortgage, car loan, whatever.
Yep.
I write down how much I owe on it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know that number off the top of their head. They've actually got to go look it up and because people come in to see me all the time.
And they don't
know.
And they don't realize it.
Yep.
So even when they look at it, they don't, okay. Have you actually missed any payments? Are you now paying interest on interest? That's a whole other show. We'll skip that today. But yeah, knowing how much you owe is one of the first steps to be aware of how to pay that debt off.
Because it happens all the time. I say, so ballpark numbers, what do you owe? Oh, I think I'm about, $30,000. Well, when we actually pull out the statements and add it up,
it's 45.
Yeah, it's always more. So, and it takes a bit of time. People get their phone out and they look and they can log in and we start writing them down.
Yep.
So you've made the list of everybody you owe money to, what the total you owe is, what's the interest on it, because that's always a bit of a revelation.
And what's this month's minimum payment, and how much of that minimum payment is interest? That's the part that'll make you cry.
And that's pretty simple, because if you look at the statement, it's got a line on there called interest.
It's all there by law. You can see all of these numbers because they have to.
So when you write that all down, okay, my minimum payments are, $1,000, and of that, I don't know, $800 is interest, $600 is
Probably.
interest. It's a significant number. And that's the most motivating thing, I guess.
Yep. Well, effectively, your head's out of the sand then. You know what the issue is, and then you got to decide, can I actually deal with it myself?
And so let's walk through how I deal with it myself then. So I've got this list in front of me, and our typical person that we deal with in either a proposal or bankruptcy owes somewhere in the sort of $40,000-$50,000 range, and we're talking unsecured debts, not cars, not mortgages.
We are seeing more and more people that owe $7,000 and $8,000, but it's all those goddamn payday loans. Sorry, do we bleep
we'll
that
bleep
out?
that out. We'll bleep that out. Credit cards obviously carry a higher interest rate than a line of credit. So it's not the amount of money you owe that's the issue. It's can you service it?
Right.
And so you're right. A lot of payday loans, it causes a lot more trouble than a big line of credit.
Effect, yep.
So I've got this debt. So step one, I've made my list. I know what's there. I've got my own budget. So I know with our typical person, they've got $300 or $400 a month that they can allocate to debt service.
Right.
The problem is their minimum payments are over $1,000.
Yep.
That's the problem. So if you can deal with it on your own, then how would you attack it?
Well, so the first thing you do is you try to see, have I got expensive forms of debt that I can convert into less expensive forms? And this was a huge trick 15 years ago. We started suggesting this to people. Okay, if you got 3 credit cards, get a line of credit, move them all onto the line of credit because it's going to be at 7 or 8% interest versus the credit cards are at 18. The problem is all those people then ran up the credit cards again. And so there's a second step to this. If you're going to move expensive forms of borrowing to less expensive, cancel the expensive stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're not able to do that, then you probably need to be speaking to some professionals. Well, you or I. People don't want to hear that they should be talking to a licensed insolvency trustee, but quite frankly, it can be the right answer.
Yeah, because there's a lot of moving parts here, and most people, when they come to see us, they've already talked to the bank to say, hey, can I get a line of credit to pay this off? And the bank says, no, you don't qualify.
Well, and if they haven't, that's the first thing we ask them to do.
Yep.
Right? See if the bank will help you. Usually they won't because of where you've allowed the problem to get.
Well, and that's why doing the math is so important. Because if I've got $50,000 worth of debts, and if the combined interest rate is, 15%, because I've got some credit cards, some payday loans, some lines of credit, whatever.
So that's $625 a month just in interest.
And if the bank says, yeah, sure, we'll give you a line of credit at 7 or 8%, that may not solve my problem.
It won't.
Because I still owe $50,000
Yep.
and I'm still making, big payments every month. That may not be enough.
Well, so what that would do in that case, because of the size of the debts, lowering the interest rate to half would reduce your minimum payments, but you still don't have enough to service the debt.
Yeah,
so
that's the problem.
You're still dependent on that debt, and if anything goes wrong, I'm talking anything, the car gets broken, and so now you can't make these payments that you were supposed to make because you had to redirect it to a new transmission. You're over the edge.
Yeah. You lose your job and your
I don't even want to talk about losing jobs or somebody getting sick.
Yeah.
If you're, making $3,000 a month and suddenly you're on EI for $2,100, you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah. Because you were just and you're not talking about the big things like losing your job or getting sick. You're talking about the little things.
I'm talking about little stuff. Yep.
I need winter tires, and we call them winter tires, not snow tires. We'll get all sorts of emails on Twitter for people saying they're not snow tires, they're winter tires.
You know how much time I spend on Twitter.
I do. 0. So don't bother tweeting at Ted. He's not going to see it. So it's the tiny little things that throw you off.
Yep.
And so obviously, our advice to anyone who is in that situation is come in and talk to a licensed insolvency trustee.
Right.
And as you said, we are the only ones licensed by the federal government to do this.
Well, and we're obliged to look at all your options. So we view it as a staircase. The top stair is, can I get a bank or somebody to refinance? Can I just juggle your problems? And believe it or not, probably 1 out of 10 people that we talk to, that's the correct solution. They just need somebody to point them in the right direction. Next rung down is, all right, do I need to be doing some new borrowing to try and get rid of the expensive debt for less expensive debt? Sometime that can be done. In the last few years, people have been refinancing their houses. That trick isn't working anymore, but that's a different program too. Now we're down to, okay, I can't consolidate my debt. I can't borrow any new stuff. I need to be looking at a consumer proposal. Can I put this debt together to get relief from the interest? None of these solutions are going to work. Well, we'll talk about bankruptcy, but it's the least used solution that we give to people that talk to us now. Proposals are probably the most used.
Yep. Yeah, and selling assets is something to consider, but most people, by the time they come into us, they don't have assets to sell.
And the problem is you used the debt to buy the asset and you paid 100% for it, but when you sell it, you're getting 20% for it. So it doesn't matter. You still owe a whack of money.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on the show before. Yeah. If you have money in RSPs, then cashing them out, gives you a big tax hit. It's probably going to bump you into a higher tax bracket. So you're going to get whacked for taxes next year.
Right.
If you don't have enough to completely pay off all the debt and pay off the taxes, then you haven't really solved your problem.
Right.
If you do a proposal or a bankruptcy, in most cases, you're able to keep your RSP.
Yep.
So you're usually better off looking at those options first, which is why we say, give us a call, come in and talk to us. By law, we have to go through all those options.
Right.
Like it's actually the law.
And we want to anyway, folks. So, I mean, the way we build a practice is by giving you the solution that's right for you, not the solution that's right for me.
Which is why we've been doing this for more than 20 years. And
we seem to be doing okay.
We're doing fine. We continue to grow. So you come in, you talk to us, we'll give you a bunch of ideas. And if the proposal or the bankruptcy ends up being the correct one, well, then we walk you through how that works.
Right.
So if you are dependent on debt, you need a solution.
Correct.
Pretty much as simple as that. Excellent. I think we've covered it all, and we got that done in less than 30 minutes. So for all those podcasts that ran way over there, we've averaged it out. We're getting our average back to 30 minutes. Ted, thanks very much for being here.
Have a nice day.
That's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.